Hello again. This is another one of my experiments in video teaching of British literature. I got a few complaints the last time that I was a bit too spontaneous and improvisational, and that I should really have my PowerPoint slides ready to go for a little mini lecture like this. To which my only defense is this is a kind of technology that would allow us to talk to each other if you were here. And so it's not just one way, so I feel justified in indulging my spontaneous classroom nature just a little bit. Anyway, we spent a lot of time on Act 1 of King Lear in our last class, justifiably so, and I think it's probably going to take all of the next class to do any justice at all to that intensely tragic play, which means that we're not going to get to John Donne again and Ben Jonson for the first time until Wednesday. So I wanted to prepare the ground, so to speak. By the way, talking about the English Renaissance, you do know that this is one of the more famous paintings of the Italian Renaissance, The Birth of Venus by Botticelli. I think some of you have been to Florence and have been to the Uffizi Gallery, so maybe you've seen this painting in the flesh, as it were. If so, you share my delight for it. Here's our website. Don't forget that Ian McClellan's version of King Lear is here. I don't think it's the whole play. They took that off YouTube. And there's that other very different production of King Lear in these two links. Instead, today I want to go to Renaissance Files. And you see I've posted a couple of new files about early 17th century poetry. So this one, Metaphysical Poets and Cavalier Poets, sets up very nicely and neatly two kinds of poetry, which, for argument's sake, we're going to be imagined led by John Donne on the left and Ben Jonson on the right. That's Jon, not John, not to be confused with Samuel Johnson. And, these are just adjectives, right? But I think that if you pick any two, you'll see the difference between these two kinds of verse. Donne is spontaneity and Jonson is deliberation, to get back to what I was talking about at the beginning of this video. But, that's kind of an exaggeration. No poet really is that spontaneous. You go back and rework. So better to say that Donne gives the effect of immediacy, whereas Ben Jonson's poems create more of a feeling of distance. If John Donne is daring, then Jonson obeys the proprieties. If Donne is rough, then Jonson is elegant. And you can go on down the line. I think this is an adequate polarity of what we're talking about here. Donne's school of poetry, and again, we're not merely imagining him as the leader of this school, but was called the Metaphysical Poets. And here are some more qualities of their verse. Whereas Ben Jonson's more of a school, I think, was called the Cavalier Poets. And I want you to look down here especially. The Cavaliers wrote terse, severe, and occasionally tender lines. Normal, if formal, speech. Thought personal love poems were embarrassing and amateurish. I mean, I'd like to know what you think of Ben Jonson's poems and the others of the Cavalier poets. They all looked up to Ben Jonson and called themselves the sons of Ben. And we're talking about these folks: Robert Herrick, a very fine poet indeed; Thomas Carew, whose claim to fame was perhaps writing the most obscene poem of the Renaissance. We'll take a quick look. But really, truly, I would like you to spend what time you have on Donne. And here is the file that I've posted about him. Indulge me a little bit as you read this with me. It says, we've actually already entered the early 17th century once with our first look at Dr. John Donne, his religious poems, and his sermons. Or have you already forgotten these familiar lines from one of the holy sonnets? Death, be not proud, though some have called thee mighty and dreadful, for thou art not so. For those whom thou think'st thou dost overthrow die not, poor death, nor yet canst thou kill me. Boy, talk about bragging. Here's the last two lines of that sonnet say, one short sleep past, we wake eternally, and death shall be no more. Death, thou shalt die. Somewhat unaccountably, we did not talk about Donne's sermons, nor did we talk about his most famous sermon, Meditation 17, in which he says, no man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. That's on page 1421 in your anthologies. Please take a look at it. It's stirring prose. But it's also intensely metaphorical, and that's why I think one might be forgiven to think that the poems that we're going to be looking at this week by Donne are written by an entirely different person than that eloquent and noble clergyman. And I say here, his secular love poems feature the same kind of energy as his religious work. And there's some history there, which I will neglect for this video. There's a picture of John Donne, and by the way, there's another picture of him in his secular role in the color section of the anthology. Look at that guy. Would you think that he would grow up to be a pastor giving sermons? Well, instead of going around the town trying to pick up young ladies, he was intensely secular in these love poems, which are not all early, mind you. Some of the love poems were written at the same time as his religious poems. So, I wonder by my troth what thou and I did till we loved, asks John Donne in The Good Morrow. Immediately you get a difference from the Cavalier poets when you encounter them. This is one person talking to another person, mostly his lover. It's not a public address. It's intensely private and dramatic. I am two fools, I know, he confessed in The Triple Fool, for loving and for saying so in whining poetry. So these are some of the great love poems in the language, ladies and gentlemen. John Donne is really one of my favorite poets. I say here in this file, now we get to focus on the secular, sexy poems like The Flea, The Good Morrow, and The Sun Rising, among others. And then I say a little bit more about his kind of verse, metaphysical verse. Some people call it Baroque or Mannerist. What you need to remember is that this kind of verse, intensely metaphysical, argumentative, is very different than the Cavalier School by Ben Jonson, about whom I will not talk in this video. So, to go out then, I think that this is one of the great poems of the language. It's called The Ecstasy. And I want to pick it up midway through. It starts on this other page here, the ecstasy. And the first stanza is where, like a pillow on a bed, a pregnant bank swelled up to rest the violet's reclining head, sat we two, one another's best. Our hands were firmly cemented with a fast balm which thence did spring. Our eye beams twisted and did thread our eyes upon one double string. That might sound like a grotesque image. I assure you it's meant to be romantic. And then I want to pick it up at line 29 here. This ecstasy doth unperplex, we said, and tell us what we love. We see by this it was not sex. We see, we saw not what did move. But as all several souls contain mixture of things they know not what, love these mixed souls doth mix again, and makes both one, each this and that. A single violet transplant, the strength, the color, and the size, all which before was poor and scant, redoubles still, and multiplies. When love with one another so interinanimates two souls, that abler soul, which thence doth flow, defects of loneliness controls. We then, who are this new soul, know of what we are composed and made, for the atomies of which we grow are souls, whom no change can invade. But oh, alas, so long, so far, our bodies, why do we forbear? After all of that Platonic metaphysical philosophy on love, he gets back to the body. And the last two stanzas of this fabulous poem, The Ecstasy. To our bodies turn we then, that so weak men on love revealed may look. Love's mysteries in souls do grow, but yet the body is his book. I mean, come on. Two lines like that, you're never going to see him. And if some lover such as we have heard this dialogue of one, let him still mark us. He shall see small change when we are to bodies gone. I think John Donne is one of the great love poems of the language, one of the great English poets. We won't get to him Monday, but we'll get to him Wednesday. And I wanted to just make this in advance before we do. Thanks. Talk to you then.